What's up everybody, we're back with another raid guide and today we're taking a look at Opulence. So I'll be going over all the abilities and mechanics as well as our overall strat for this fight. So this is a two-phase fight, starts off with a gauntlet and then the boss itself. And your raid needs to be split into two groups to complete separate gauntlets at the same time. Each side has a mini-boss to fight, and the goal of each team is to follow their mini-boss till the end and eventually kill it. And each gauntlet features one ability unique to it and several abilities shared by both mini-bosses. And in true dungeon spirit, there are several traps used by each side of the gauntlet. Once both teams have completed their side and killed their mini-boss, you engage the primary boss, Opulence. During the gauntlet, there will be a room where you can pick up a very powerful buff that you will need in order to kill the primary boss, but I will go over that a bit later. So, just a fair warning, there's a lot to cover on this fight. So let's start off with the shared abilities that both the mini-bosses used during the gauntlet. Starting off with Crush, 180-degree frontal cone smash, deals raid-wide damage regardless of position and an additional big hit like 120k to anyone in the cone. Plus it also stuns them for 4 seconds, so don't stand in the cone. And Consuming Flame, once the mini-boss moves to a new room, the previous room will be blocked by fire. Fire is bad, don't be in fire room. And Overload, at 25% HP, the mini-boss uses Overload. It deals a bit of damage randomly to 2-3 people at a time, roughly every half second or so, but it also empowers their unique ability, making it, well, much more powerful and dangerous. And some of the traps, we have Flame Jet. Flames will periodically jet from one side of the room, it's a little hatch that opens and fire comes out. It deals a bit of fire damage to anyone stand in it. Try not standing in it. And a Ruby Beam, I-beam style beam, targets one person and drops small circles of scorched ground underneath their feet. Try and use up as little space as possible while you kite this, like run in a small circle. The scorched ground drop deals a large amount of ticking damage if you stand in it, so again, don't. And make sure not to drop it close to the mini-boss as it makes avoiding other mechanics a lot harder. And Pulse Quickening Toxin. When you enter the 4th room of the gauntlet, you get a dot on everyone on that side. It deals increasing nature damage every tick. If anyone with Pulse Quickening Toxin drops below 50% HP, they get Quickened Pulse. It increases all secondary stats by roughly 250 for 10 seconds. So when you enter the 4th room, you want the raid to drop down below 50% to trigger this and then heal them up. It's not mandatory, but it's a nice buff. When you push the boss 10% and he moves into a new room, you will drop the whole toxin. And Hex of Lethargy, a debuff which causes damage when you move, and it can and should be dispelled. And for the mini-bosses themselves, we have the Hand of Inzashi. Its unique ability is Volatile Charge. 8-second debuff deals ticking damage. Upon expiring, it deals roughly 70k in a 6-yard radius, and you drop an electrical ball on the ground. The ball itself explodes every 6 seconds or so in a 6-yard radius and deals electrical damage to anyone hit. And when it's empowered, so at 25% when it overloads, it hits twice as many people with this debuff. And the other mini-boss, Yulat's Bulwark, it uses Flames of Punishment, a around 90-degree frontal cone, which he will use multiple times and rotate around, so around 10 times, and it covers about 1.5 full circle during his rotation. Anyone hit takes a large amount of damage plus some ticking damage for 8 seconds, so just make sure you're always behind the boss when he does this. When it's empowered at 25%, the cone gets around 180 degrees instead, so then you have to literally be behind the boss and move with him. And now for the buffs you can get during the gauntlets. These are clickable jewels that appear in the 7th room. And each raid roll has jewels specific to them. And whenever you pick a gem, it causes Thief's Bane, a 30-sec debuff. And when it expires, it deals like 500k shadow damage to you. For tanks, we have Diamond of Unshakable Protection. It's the only one you can use. Absorbs 50% of all damage up to 300% of your max HP. Once once the absorb shield breaks, it goes on cooldown for 30 sec. After 30 sec, it goes back up. And healers, you have Amethyst of the Shadow King, increases your haste by 50% and causes your heals to buff the target with Shadow touched, which decreases all shadow damage taken by 90% for 1 minute. Anytime a raid member with this buff suffers shadow damage, everyone within 10 yards of him gains 1% mana. They can also take Tailwind Sapphire, buffs your healing targets with tailwinds, increases damage done by 5% for 30 seconds, stacks up to 5 times. When you have 5 stacks, it turns into Soothing Breeze, increases healing and damage done by 100% for 12 seconds. One healer per side have to use the Amethyst. The shadow reduction debuff is required to survive several different mechanics, including the debuff you get when you pick up a gem, Thief's Bane. Without the shadow touched buff, this will just insta-kill you. And for you trigger-happy DPSers out there, you have Ruby of Focused Animus. Dealing damage causes focused animus on your target, increasing damage taken by 1% for 5 seconds. And this effect stacks to infinity and beyond, but only 1 stack per second. And Topaz of Brilliant Sunlight. When no players are within 10 yards of you, you gain incandescent stacks. You gain 1 stack per second roughly, and when you reach 100 stacks, you become grossly incandescent, increasing the critical strike chance of everyone within 10 yards by 100%, and this lasts for 20 seconds. There's also an Emerald of the Earthen Roots. Gain 1% increased damage done per second you stand still. When moving, you rapidly lose these stacks, like 1 every 0.3 seconds. And the Opal of Unleashed Rage. You gain 2% increased damage done per enemy you've dealt damage to, and this stacks infinitely. You want to have as much uptime as possible on the grossly incandescent buff. When we did it, it looked like no more than 4 players could pick up the Topaz. To keep a high uptime on it, you will need to manage their stacks. It's fairly simple to stagger them. Just try and keep all 4 Topaz buffs to be around 20 stacks apart. And you manage this by simply moving close to another player. When you're close to a player, you lose stacks, and when you move out, you start gaining stacks again. And when one Topaz hits 100 stacks, that player moves into the raid, buffs everyone, and then it's rinse repeat. So just try and keep them around 20 stacks apart. So if possible, you want at least 1 or 2 player per gauntlet side with the Topaz and to stagger their stacks. After the Topaz, Ruby is the next best thing. At least 1 person per side uses this. Just make sure that you never lose the buff due to downtime, so you always need to hit the miniboss or always hit the boss. And after this, you just want everyone else to pick an Opal. It's pretty weak during the gauntlet phase, but becomes extremely powerful in phase 2. Add spawn 8 at a time in phase 2, granting 16% damage increase per spawn, so it ramps up fairly quick. So when all of the gauntlets are done and the minibosses are down, we move on to Opulence itself, which is phase 2. Opulence uses Horde power. It gains 100% HP and damage done for each miniboss not dead when you activate the boss, so don't activate Opulence before the minibosses are dead. Just stay still and wait until both minibosses are dead, then you run out to Opulence. Opulence uses Liquid Gold. A 12-second debuff deals ticking damage. Upon expiration, you drop a puddle of molten gold on the ground. Puddle deals ticking damage when you stand in it. It's kinda like the first boss in King's Rest. And Spirits of Gold. 8 adds spawn under the boss and slowly walk towards the edges of the room. If they reach the edges, they cast Channel Gold, which throws gold at the raid. They look like pale yellow swirlies. They deal physical damage, just avoid getting hit. These add are fully CCable, so try and have a stun rotation going so that they stay under the boss for as long as possible. Mass Grips and Vortex works as well. And Coin Shower, a meteor style mechanic, marks 1 player and after 10 seconds it deals like 500k damage split between everyone within 7 yards. Stack in melee for this, minimum of 6 people, but more is better. Also uses Whale of Greed, a 10-sec channel by the boss, deals a large amount of shadow damage every other second, and damage is increased each tick. When the cast ends, boss gains Greed, increases all damage done by 25%. And lastly, Coin Sweep, a massive massive tank smash, deals a large amount of physical damage, requires active mitigation to be active, or you can get one shot by this. This affects a small area around the targeted tank, so don't stand on the tank. So with that said, how do we deal with all of this? Well, you split your raid evenly into two groups, as I mentioned before. Try and send more high mobility classes like hunters and melee to the eastern side gauntlet. There's a lot of movement there. And you need to work your way through the gauntlets. The mini-bosses do not have shared health pool, so try and time your DPS on each side. But you want to try and keep them on roughly the same HP, or at least so they die within a few seconds of each other if you can. In room 4 you get pulse quickening toxin. If people drop below 50% they get a buff. In room 7 you need to take your gems, your jewels. Remember, at least one healer from each side must take the amethyst. And one DPS from each side must take the ruby. 1 or 2 DPS from each side needs the topaz, or assign a group of 4 in total. Any other DPS should just grab the opal. Your healers with the amethyst need to track the shadow touch debuff or buff. Anyone without this will die, so it's fairly important, I'd say. DPS with the ruby should be classes that can ensure little to no downtime. Other than that, make sure you dodge the crush, the frontal cone, the lasers, the fire, more of the fire, and also don't stand in the fire. Try to minimize area covered by the ruby beam puddles. If you have an immunity, you can also use that and just stand around and chill a bit if you get targeted by the beam. On the west side with Inzashi, try and put the volatile charges against a wall. And for the eastern side, when the mini-boss uses flames of punishment, just make sure you're always behind and move with the boss. And at 25% the mini-bosses overload, so try and burn the mini-bosses down as fast as possible at this point. When the mini-bosses die, you engage Opulence and phase 2 begins. Have everyone in your raid stacked in melee unless they have the topaz. If so, only stack when you need to stagger or when you need to buff. Spread the crit buff to everyone. If everyone stacks, it helps out with two things. The crit buff gets spread to everyone and the meteor coins get split by everyone, so pretty much no damage. If you get liquid gold, run out and drop it outside the raid. Set a CC or stun rotation for the spirits of gold and make sure to kill them as soon as possible. Tank should alternate who takes the coin smash based on their gem's shield. This will massively reduce damage taken, but don't forget to also use active mitigation for it. We mostly tank swapped as soon as one tank lost its gem shield, so we just bounced it back and forth based on that. And the amethyst healers must ensure 100% uptime on shadow touched on the whole raid to prevent Whale of Greed from wiping the raid. Depending on your DPS, you can either lust on the first set of ads or the second set of ads. We lusted on the first set of ads and it went fine, but if you wait until the second set you will get more damage out of it due to ruby stacks and opal stacks. And I think that pretty much covers everything. If you have any questions at all, make sure to hit me up in the comments below. Don't forget to check out my Patreon if you'd like to support my work. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave me a like and ring that notification bell and switch it to all. Thanks for watching and I will see you next time.